Oak. He's from Atlanta. And just to give you a background, Nilesh is an author, researcher, speaker, and a corporate consultant. He has a qualification of chemical engineering MS and an executive MBA. He has published 3 books and he writes extensively on ancient Indian history. Nilesh helps Indians become aware of the deep antiquity of Indian civilization so that they truly comprehend, present, and defend the grand narrative of India, unlike most of the other Indic researchers, because he builds it through scientific acumen and logical reasoning. He is an adjunct faculty at Institute of Advanced Sciences, Dartmouth, Massachusetts. Now, before he starts, I would like to point out a saying in Sanskrit that he sent to me, which goes like this: Namulam likhyate kinchit nanapekshitam uchyate. That means nothing is written without proof or evidence, and nothing is said more than necessary. Now, today's topic is a very interesting topic. He's going to describe the dating of Mahabharata. When did the Mahabharata happen? So with this introduction, I would like Nilesh to start his presentation.
Namaskar to everyone. Good morning. Now heard of Nilesh Oak, so you can't say you never heard of him. Okay, so that's by force or so. I am here. The reason I mentioned that is because over time, through the compulsions of life, many of us have separated ourselves, not deliberately always, but maybe because of other practical circumstances, sometimes due to our ignorance of it or our brainwashing that, why waste time doing something, looking at the history. We may not be aware of it. So what I'm going to tell you today, and I'll take about 40-50 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer session, is some of those things will be very familiar to you. Not a surprise, because anyone who grows up in the Indian context has heard about Mahabharata, Ramayana, Rigveda, and other things. Other things will come out as some new information, which is to say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's interesting. And then the third piece of information that will also come to you is, like, in some sense, that will provoke you for different reasons, because you are holding a certain understanding about that subject. And what I'm going to tell you is going to conflict with it. So it's going to provoke you. And that's also the intention. It's not in a bad way, but it is basically what happens is when you ask the right questions, or when you give information to the right questions, it does, the effect it has on all of us is to rouse us from our slumber. So that is that provocation. And the idea behind all these 3 aspects is that we have a very interesting question answer session. My request to all of you during the question answer session, please follow these 2. You can, by the way, type your question in the chat as my talk progresses, so that you won't forget it. If you have a pen and paper, you can write it down. Afterwards, in the question answer session, you can actually verbally ask it also. Now, be very careful when you verbally ask the question. Please make your question as crisp and clear as possible. Don't turn that into a mini lecture. Just ask the question. I would not encourage you to make a comments. In fact, I will stop you if you do that. That's not a very effective use of time. I'm just telling you based on my experience of now last 10 years. Just before this, I talked to through, of course, Zoom, 37,000 students in American universities and colleges, just like 9 o'clock our time, at 9 a.m. To 10:20. It's a different dynamics. We actually don't take any questions because it's impossible to do that with 37,000 people. Okay, that's just not possible. So with that, what I'm going to also do is start sharing the screen. If you want to turn off your cameras for next 40 minutes or so, that's perfectly fine, because all we are going to see is a screen. Okay. And then when we get into question and answer, you can turn those on again, but it's up to you how you want to do it. I'll put mine on so that you can see me. So I'm going to start sharing the screen. I'll use a PowerPoint presentation. to go through this. If you would also mute yourself, that would be very much appreciated. I mean, otherwise I have to go and actually do that. So please watch for muting it. I can mute you all, but I'll just not do that right now unless I have to. So the subject today is dating of the Mahabharata war, multidisciplinary scientific evidence. And I'm very happy to be with this group. Again, I'll not spend time on thanking many individuals, but it was Raviji who contacted me, and we had a short meeting with Prafullaji, and I may be forgetting other names there, but thank you to everyone, and thank you to all for attending. If I have to give a summary of my dating work, okay, just a very broad summary, and summary based on something that you can easily relate to. It's right here. Now, I have dated timing of many Purana updates. I have dated the timing of Sushruta, the Kapila, and Sage Kapila, for example, Sage Sushruta, the Ayurveda Acharya. But I'll not go into that because not everybody knows them. But at the center is the time of time axis, basically. The x-axis is the time axis. Today is 21st century. 0 is like going back to the beginning of Julian calendar, and somebody raised a hand. That may be by mistake. So I'm going to avoid those distractions, by the way. Okay, so please hold. There are no questions in between. We will ask the questions only at the end. So either you type in the chat or just write it down. Okay. So Gregorian calendar going back to 2000 years. Then minus 5K refers to 5000 BC, 10,000 BC, 15,000 BC. Against this time axis, my work of say last 25 to 30 plus years, I determined the dating of Mahabharata, a very specific year for the year of Mahabharata Yuddha, war. That's what I'm going to talk today, is 5561 BC, more than 7,500 years ago. I did the same for the Ram Ravana Yuddha, or I was trying to do Ramayana, and there are many other dates related to the events of Ramayana. But the specific year that you see here is the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha, 12,209 BCE. Now, this one I arrived at using the evidence from Valmiki Ramayana for Ramayana and from the Mahabharata for Mahabharata. And it was a specific astronomy evidence. When it comes to Rigveda, and my work on the Rigveda dating began very recently, like 2000, end of 2016. And now I find a lot of astronomy evidence in Rigveda also, but it still doesn't allow you to define a precise date like Ramayana or Mahabharata. But the date that you are seeing is based on the geological evidence, geology, hydrology, morphodynamics of rivers, geophysics, geochemistry. And what that tells us is that definitely some portions of Rigveda are more than 24,000 years old. So if there is a one takeaway from this slide, assuming, of course, you follow my works through blogs, books, videos, those of you who have already done it, those who may like to do, once you are convinced, you should be able to tell with a confidence based on a absolutely phenomenal scientific evidence, more than 1,000 plus empirical evidence from dozen plus different disciplines of hard sciences. We are not talking of some humanities disciplines or anything, hard sciences. I'll show you the list here in a minute. We can say that our civilization is definitely older than 24,000 years. That is the takeaway from here. So if you are used to saying this lazy, I would say, I also call it tamasic, like, oh, how old is Hindu civilization? 5,000 years. It's an extremely lazy number. Okay, it's a wrong number, but it's also very lazy number. We need to change that at least to say, oh, more than 24,000 years. So that's a takeaway from here. With that, I want to get into the today's subject. Now, how did I determine this year of Mahabharata war? I did it based on exclusive astronomy evidence from the Mahabharata text. And Mahabharata text has more than 300 specific astronomy observations. And imagine the number of you who are in solving the jigsaw puzzle or a crossword puzzle. Okay, think of this puzzle that Vyasadeva has done, given it to us, or Valmiki has given it to us in Ramayana, through Ramayana. Think of this as a complex puzzle of jigsaw, but also crossword. So you have to look at the text, what they're saying, but in a very scientific fashion, in an independent, like objective testing, what we call, or pratyaksha praman, through that, like the way we do the test in the lab, something that is not there in the Mahabharata, something that is from the discipline sciences that we understand today, and we have to bring it together. We'll talk about little bit of science too. But once I determine that specific year, 5561 BCE, then it was my curiosity, but of course, those people who read my works and were very fascinated, they said, well, is there additional evidence? And I was also interested. And over the years, so this one I did 5561 BCE in 2009. Then it took me 2 years to write the first book. And since then, so what, last 10, 12, 14 years, I am looking at evidence from all these different disciplines. Now, each of this can take 5 days. In fact, I taught a summer workshop at Chinmaya Vishwa Vidyapit few years ago, 2018. And out of that astronomy 300 plus evidence, we were only discussing 50 data points. And it took us 5 days, 8 to 5, including after dinner, the student used to get together with me. And after 5 days, we were not done, which means what I'm going to show you is like a movie trailer, a highlight of it for you to develop appreciation for it. And hopefully you get deeper into the reading Mahabharata itself, reading my blogs, books, watching videos, and so on. So we will not able to do justice to all the disciplines. So I'm going to pick 3 or 4. So genealogy of kings and sages, something that people can relate to, but that is where the biggest confusion comes. Astronomy, technically, many people feel challenged. And many people will read the book and says, I didn't understand it because I don't understand astronomy and Sanskrit. And that is absolutely wrong interpretation. To understand what is being said, you don't need to understand astronomy if you read my books, and you don't need to understand Sanskrit, although knowing both helps. What you really need is a good scientific acumen, vijnana buddhi. You need a good logical reasoning skills and some background knowledge. You ought to have some knowledge about the Mahabharata and genre. We will take oceanography evidence. Now that's directly connected with Krishna's Dwarka and flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka, which Mahabharata tells us it happened 36 years after the Mahabharata war. And I will also take genetics, which is a very relatively recent science. Like, since 86, it has seen great progress in terms of the sophistication of it, and it's making a lot of progress. I'll show you how, I'll just pick these 2 or 3, how amazing evidence exists, but that's true for other areas that we are not going to discuss today. I'm going to take you back to one of the darshan shastra of a Indian tradition. Like there are Shad Darshanas you might have heard, Vaisheshika Darshan, Nyaya Darshan, Sankhya Darshan, Yoga Darshan, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa, and so on. This one is from a Nyaya Darshan. What is our concept of knowledge? And that's where I say many times we have misunderstood now in our times, frankly, how the knowledge is validated. Now, Nyaya Darshana, the objective of Nyaya Darshana is to teach all of us how to think properly. How much detail they have studied this. So when we talk of knowledge, think of this as a data, think of this as a information, okay? Like don't immediately translate that as a jnana, although that's the way we understand it. Now, how do we get knowledge? We get knowledge through many sources. Okay, for example, some people telling something, we reading a book, watching a TV, reading a newspaper. The other way we also get knowledge is just by experience, anubhava, empirical. We touch a hot plate and our finger goes away and we say, that's not good. That's not good for me. Now, what happens is all of us, very important you pay attention to this as we go into the actual evidence. Just because I read something in the Mahabharata, just because I read something in some Purana, or I watch it on the TV or read it in the newspaper, majority in their naivety, I would say, simply say, why would somebody lie about it? But now if you look at the TVs and newspapers and magazines and even so-called popular magazines, famous magazines like Economist, it has really gone downhill, it was always agenda driven, but it used to be very interesting. Now I stopped reading all magazines. Actually, I did that for many years now. The point is, we may think it's a truth, but no, the Shabda, when it comes, when some piece of information comes to you, you must immediately understand just because it's in some magazine, famous magazine, it is told by a professor coming from some guru authority, by itself, it's not true. It may be valid, may not be valid. That's the point of view of a Nyaya Darshana and our Shad Darshanas, by the way. They all insist on Pratyaksha. So when you hear something, you read something, it may be valid, it may not be valid. Please keep that in mind. So how do you know whether it's a valid or not? The only way that you are left with is experimental empirical anubhava. Okay, and that's how you can decide whether it's a true or false. Again, it has its limitations. Even when you do the lab experiment, you can do some mistake with it and so on, and may lead to wrong conclusion. But if you do it right, you can reach the conclusion which is truth, takes you to the truth, or a best approximation to the truth, because we cannot know everything else. And the Nyaya Darshana talks about some method called avayava. I'm not going to make it complicated for you. It has got 5 steps. Or we have a few folks with some background in Jainism, like Prafullaji, for example, which is also there in the Nyaya Darshana older text, but Jainism brought it back, I can say. They took the avayava method to 10 steps. Very fascinating what they have done, okay, in the Jain logic. But that's not a subject today. My point is, I'm mentioning 5 steps of avayava because those are the exactly 5 steps of modern science. And the Nyaya Darshana, I have shown that, or the knowledge of Nyaya Darshana is more than 14,000 plus years. Again, that's not a subject today. So please keep this in mind. So just because you hear something, read something, it may be valid, may not be valid, but the only way we can actually truly know is through the experimentation. This is not to say that you cannot trust what your parents are saying, or what your guru is saying, or what you read on, listen to on the TV. But you are on your own. I mean, you have to decide whether this makes sense or not. Otherwise, it can lead you to the wrong conclusion, and therefore the drawbacks of it. There is a concept called crucial evidence. Number of you from a science background would easily relate to it. Okay, I don't know if you heard that echo there, but let's see if I need to do something here. Okay. So crucial, please mute yourself if you're joining. So crucial evidence is something, suppose if I tell you the Mahabharata war happened 5561 BC and everyone agrees and no other person in the world says anything else, not a problem. Everyone says, yeah, I have not studied it, but Nilesh says 5561 BC. No one else is saying anything else, so must be right. But what if some other person now comes and he says, well, it's according to me, it's a 3500 BCE or some other date. And I'm sure you have heard many others. Now the question comes, which one of the two is correct? Or are they both wrong? And any of this is possible. In fact, the possibility is that the both can be wrong or one of them is correct. There is no third possibility. Either the both of them are wrong. Now I want to tell you that Mahabharata, many researchers in last 300, 400 years, at least that we have evidence for documentation, more than 100 plus researchers have tried to determine the date of Mahabharata, and those 130 plus have come up with those many different dates. So for an ordinary person, it can be a puzzle. Okay, the person may start with a Shraddha, but we have to take a journey to Pradnya. From Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Pradnya. That is what Patanjali asks us to do. Don't be lazy. Shraddha is a journey, beginning, but don't stop there. Now, when you have two claims, to decide which one is the correct, which one is wrong, or if both of them are wrong, or which one of the two is the better, we can use a crucial evidence. So just as an example, I'm going to take something. Hopefully this is something familiar to a good number of you, at least even if you're not in science, or you would have heard this. For example, names like Copernicus, Kepler, Newton, Einstein, most of you would know these names. Let me start with the Ptolemy. This is only the astronomy history of a Western Europe, you can say. We will not talk about Indian astronomy here. The quick point I want to mention is, so there was a time when 2000 years ago or so, Ptolemy had his theory, and Ptolemy thought Earth is at the center, everyone is rotating around. Then 1500 years went by, Copernicus came, and Copernicus proposed, again, I'm talking Western Europe. Copernicus proposed, well, if we imagine the sun at the center, just like Ptolemy was imagining Earth at the center, actually our model becomes simpler. And how did they decide? Some of the epicycles, I'll not go into technicality, that they had to use to predict the positions of the planets. There were 70 plus epicycles by 15th century. When Copernicus put sun in the center, so these are the theories, by the way, guys. Theories, prameya, siddhanta, hypothesis, we say. Ptolemy said Earth at the center, Copernicus said sun at the center. As soon as he put sun at the center and did the calculations, now the epicycles go down from 70 to 34. Things became easier. Something else happened. Just like we see the phases of the moon, right? Different phases like Amavasya through Purnima and back to Amavasya. Same thing happens for a planet Venus. We can see that very easily. I mean, not with the naked eyes, with the telescopes. And people were observing, but that could not be explained by Ptolemy's model where Earth is at the center. But now, as soon as Copernicus imagined Sun at the center, now you can understand why we see the phases of the Venus, just like we see the phases of the moon. So Copernicus may not be exactly right, but he is closer to the truth than Ptolemy. See, that's how the science works, okay? Now, if you come to Kepler, something beautiful happens. Until then, they are thinking the orbits are circular. The planet's orbits around the sun or Earth are circular. Kepler said, after study, of course, not like just thinking and sitting like that, he said, it appears that they are elliptical, not circular. And then he tried to put his thesis forward. Guess what? Once he did that and showed the recalculations, guess what? All those epicycles simply vanished. There is no need for those epicycles. That also tells us, these are crucial experiments, guys, okay? That tells us that, the fact that we don't need epicycles, oh, that's a crucial experiment. We are progressing towards the truth. It tells us that we are directionally going there. With Newton, something else happened. Newton's preserved the successes of the previous guys. Still sun is at the center. Now the orbits are elliptical, but Newton gave a mathematical formulation thanks to the Indian astronomy and thanks to the Indian mathematics. That's not the subject today, but that's the only reason why Newton could do it. But he did something else. With his mathematical formulations, now that theory, so far, people were trying to figure out only planets. Now it could be used for everything. If I store a throne, at how far distance it will go, at what force it will hit the glass, everything could be calculated using that formulation. Okay, so now the theory, that mathematical formulation, which was only meant for planets, now can be used everywhere. So the theory became universal now, universal applicability. It can be used on the Earth for throwing a stone also, and on, and Einstein went further. My point is, that's the nature of our experiment. That is the nature of scientific crucial evidence that you have to put forward to understand if we are approaching the truth. Now let's look at our first piece of evidence, the genealogy evidence. The reason I took it is many people, after they listen to my astronomy discussion, they always ask this question. So I wanted to answer that upfront because many people make a huge confusion here. What we have, something that most of us, most of you who are reasonably familiar with Mahabharata may be able to relate to. In the Puranas, we have, which is Puranas maybe older, but the updates have happened to them after Mahabharata, because most of the Puranas talk about some Mahabharata incidents. Sometimes they come as in a modified way. If you go to Jain literature, they get even further modified, Buddhist literature further modified, but they are all aware of a Mahabharata and also Ramayana. In Puranas, what you find is many Puranas give the number of years, the duration between Parikshit, King Parikshit, and King Mahapadmananda. Think of that Padmananda as a time of a Chanakya, okay? And Chanakya removes Nanda and puts that, I forgot the name, Chandragupta, on the throne. Now, what do Puranas say? Puranas is Smriti, meaning it's remembered. Like a Shruti, Smriti is remembered. When they are sitting down to write, like, you want to sit down to write your family history, and you are asking someone, hey, what was the name of that person's father? And somebody doesn't know. He says, I think it was Madhav. So the person says, we don't know for sure, but yeah, let's write, his name appears to be Madhav, or somebody was thinking that its name is a Madhav. Even that is the language you will see in the Purana. Okay, again, that's not a subject, but I'll tell you. So the different durations given in different Puranas, like a Padma Puran, Bhagavad Puran, Vishnu Puran, Matsya Puran, Skanda Puran, and so on, are like this. Different Puranas giving different dates. They say between Parikshit Mahapadmananda, one Puran says 1050 years went by, another says 1100, 1150, 1500, 3310. So which one number we are going to pick up? Well, that's not how science works, right? So we have to try sensitivity analysis. But something else we need in order to know how far away possibly Mahabharata happened. We also need to know the timing of Mahapadmananda, even if we trust these numbers. And you know what? You'll be surprised. If you go to Wikipedia and the Western Academia, and now Indian LAC is following that, you will see 300 BCE. What evidence? None. None. Okay. Now, there are many other researchers who have also proposed different dates: 600 BC, 800 BC, 1200 BC, 1300, 1600 BC, 1800 BC, 2300 BC. So that's the range for Mahapadmananda. I will tell you, in spite of that, there is no solid evidence, solid in the sense of a scientific science speak, for a specific date yet. But if we take this range and take the range here, the conclusion we can say is, based on this genealogy evidence, and I've taken one portion of genealogy evidence, there is more information out there. The Mahabharata war, we would say, happened sometime between 1350 BC to 5610 BC. All I want to tell you is that even if you use this approximation, the 5561 fits here. Now, what is the problem with that? This cannot ever be a decisive evidence. Why? Because now suppose somebody like 3500 BC, I told you, the person will say, my 3500 BC also fits here. So we both could be right, both could be wrong. This information can be wrong because there is no way to objectively test it. It is useful, we should use it, but it will never be decisive. So it's important to understand that certain sciences can give you directional idea, certain information data can give you directional idea. It may not be decisive. Let's go to a quickly scientific method. The 5 points that I discuss in Avayava, these are not exactly Avayava points, but that's the science method of science. Sir Karl Popper, if you have heard the name, he describes modern science as what? It's a triangulation, the middle triangle of explanation, prediction, testing. Explanation is that evidence. In the context of a theory, you propose a theory to solve a tough problem, and in the context of a background knowledge. How does this all business begins? You begin this because there is some problem that is not been solved by current theories. Therefore, you propose. Like if you think the journey of Ptolemy to Copernicus, to Kepler, to Newton, to Maxwell, all the way to Einstein, you will see that Newton did something, but something Newton cannot explain. That's why Maxwell came. Something that Maxwell did cannot be explained. Maxwell couldn't explain certain things, so Einstein came, and so on. So that's how we begin our journey. And then we propose a solution, and then we test the solution in a scientific fashion, and we draw inferences and so on. So my takeaway for you there is, if anybody, not just related to Mahabharata, is claiming that she has found out something, a solution to a problem that is not been solved yet, you should immediately ask, well, tell me these 5 things. What is your theory? What is your evidence? How do you objectively test it? How do you draw the logical inferences? Let me make sure you're drawing it logically. And what are some of the background assumptions you made? Those are the 5 avayava steps that Nyaya Darshana talks about, or the modern science I showed you on the previous slide. Quickly, our summary. Einstein says it is the theory that describes what we can observe. If I ask you to observe everything in your room right now, you'll be puzzled. You said, what should I observe? But if I say, please observe in your room right now where you are sitting and note down the things in your room that help you decide, help you tell about the time. You will look at the clock, you look at your smartphone, you might look at the calendar and so on. So now I gave you a specific thing to look at. That's what Albert Einstein is saying. It is the theory that describes what we can observe. The theory tells you what you should observe, what you must observe. So what is my theory for the dating of Mahabharata? All astronomy observations of Mahabharata are factual observations of Mahabharata times. So if there is astronomy observation in Mahabharata, if I can objectively test it using mathematical calculations, astronomy simulations, anything objectively, independently, something that I see, you should be able to see the same thing. If you follow what I am doing, and it is objectively testable, you can calibrate and so on and so forth, it should give us, all of us, the same answer. That's what I mean by objective testing. Mahabharata has 300 plus. Now, how do you get this? You have to extract them, read multiple times. I read like 30 plus times. And of course, some other previous researchers, great researchers, had collected references. I started with that, but still I had to read to make sure nothing is missed. And actually I missed. In 2010, I had only 215. Every time I read, I get something more that I have missed. The good news is everything new I found, it also matches for 5561 BC, and it does not match for any other date. Because it's a kavya, because history is given to us in a kavya form, both Ramayana and Mahabharata, the astronomy evidence comes as a what? As a descriptions, as a alankar, as a nimitta, as a upaman, that is the form is going to come to us. I took all that evidence and not go into technicality, separate it out in the appropriate classification for astronomy type of evidence. Just like when you are cooking, There is a method to madness, right? You put the oil, you heat it up, then you put mustard first before cumin seeds. Or if you're going to put, say, fenugreek seeds, right? Methi seeds, you'll put those first. Different time is required, different temperature. So there is a sequence. Similarly, there is a method to classification and so on. Long story short, the evidence that you are seeing in the blue, the left side, what tells you? It tells you where Mahabharata happened and where Mahabharata definitely would not have happened. Okay. And the evidence in the orange color helps you go precise and accurate to that specific year of 5561 BCE. So from the blue, I'm going to show you a few observations. So the blue observation shows you, this is where my journey began in 1995 with respect to Mahabharata. I was in Canada, just finished my master's, and I went to library to read Mahabharata, and this is what I found. There are, as I said, 300 plus references, but this reference is a fascinating. This is that crucial evidence, you can say, and this formed a crucial experiment. Just before the day of the war, Mahabharata tells us, Vyasa went to Dhritarashtra and was making a last minute attempt to stop the war. And in that context, Vyasa is telling many things. He says, look, I'm not seeing good things out there. Like this is happening, that is happening. So he gives all kinds of different things. Some of them, like, you'll read and say, what is going on? But in that list, there is also astronomy observations. This is astronomy observation. This is how astronomy observation looks like in Mahabharata. It says, Ya Chaisha Visuta Rajas Trailoke Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Tayapesha Vasishta Prashtuta Kruta. Crude, quick, short, sharp, crisp translation. Dear Dhritarashtra, Arundhati is not referring to a lady here. It's referring to the star. If you read Mahabharata, you will know that it's referring to the star. That Arundhati star from Saptarshi is walking ahead of Vasishta. And it is giving many other related to the planets. We are going to quickly look at this. Now, why this is a big deal? This is a big deal what Vyasa is saying in Mahabharata. It was big deal to me. It was big deal known to few researchers in last 150 years. Lokmanya Tilak knew about it. C.V. Vaidya Bharatacharya knew about it. Bharat Ratna Pandurang Vaman Kane knew about it. Dr. P.V. Vartak, if you have heard this name, knew about it. Okay. And even Western Europeans knew about it. In fact, they used this observation to teach the world, and including Indians, that how old Indians are idiots and write all kinds of crazy stuff like Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishta, which is astronomically impossible. But Vyasa or whoever it is has written that. That's how they used it in a negative way. So why this is a problem? Why this is a crucial experiment? Because if you look at it in our times, when I say our times, 2022, 2016, but even 1,000 years ago, 2,000, 3,000 doesn't matter. Vasishta, those of you who understand astronomy, Vasishta is always walking ahead Arundhati. It's an apparent motion because Earth is rotating around itself with the North Pole as a kind of a center there, fixed point. And so the Saptarshis come and they go around, come from the northeast, go around and set on the northwest. So Vasishta is always ahead. To understand this, you need to have some knowledge of astronomy and visual astronomy. But this is again objectively testable. Everyone with a decent sense of astronomy has to agree with it, will agree with it. Okay. Otherwise, other people will make a confusion. So in our time, Vasishta is always walking ahead. If you go back 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years, still Vasishta is walking ahead. That's what astronomy tells us. But Vyasa is saying at the time of Mahabharata war, it is Arundhati is walking ahead. So what's the deal? This is what fascinated me. These are the kind of crucial evidence one is looking for. Do you know how long I spent? From 1995 to 2009, 15 years, I was just working on this one verse. Of course, I was doing my work and studying more about Mahabharata. But I said, until I solve this, I have no reason, I have no right to determine the dating of Mahabharata. That is the rule I made for myself. And finally, when I did this in 2009, this is a quick summary of it. So what you find is there is actually a time period of 5,000 years, 6,000 years, say 45 BC to 11,000 BC. In these 2 years, both Arundhati and Vasishta walk together, no one ahead, no one behind. But in between, it is Arundhati which walks ahead. Again, we will not go into technicality. You can watch my 500 plus talks, read my 3 books and 500 plus blog articles. But I'm just showing you that specific year that finally I narrowed down, and I'll share how. Arundhati, look here, Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta as seen from the Earth. during that 5,000 years period, and 5561, which I determine as the year of Mahabharata war, does fall there. This is, if you are into science, if you have understood the discoveries, how the discoveries were made by Ptolemy and Copernicus and all that, or the X-ray and various things, this should fascinate you. This is as good or better than all the research work that kind of you might be familiar with the cosmology. Okay. Now, what did it tell us? It didn't tell us the exact year of Mahabharata war. It told us Mahabharata war definitely did not happen anytime after 4636 BC or 45 BC. It did not happen anytime before 10,000 BC or 11,000 BC. Okay. That is that blue evidence we are talking. Now, if you look at Bhishma Nirvana evidence, which is 60 plus evidence from the Mahabharata, long story for simplified for you, Bhishma was on the bed of arrows, 18 days war lasted. Bhishma fell down in the battle on the 10th day of the war. And all of you know, he was waiting until the day of Uttarayan, not 14 January, guys. 14 January is in our times, Uttarayan of that time. Like in our times, truly Uttarayan is 21st of December and not 14 January. That's a different subject, not today's subject. So he was waiting from the day he fell down to the day of winter solstice, and Mahabharata tells us that that duration was definitely more than 92. Now, what's the big deal about it? When you combine that with the other Mahabharata data, like when the Mahabharata war took place and so on and so forth. So Bhishma Nirvana is on the day of Uttarayan here, and we have to go backwards more than 92 days. And even after that, we have to go 10 days further for the first day of the Mahabharata war. So that's like a 102 days. So from the day of winter solstice, in our times 21st December, we go back 102 days. We know what happens. We come to the first part of Sharad season, okay, before 21st September. Now, Mahabharata tells us it was the month of Margashirsha. But now we have a month of Margashirsha coming here at the winter solstice. Now, if you understand astronomy, precision of Earth's axis, and how the lunar months move, shift with respect to season, the rule is about every 2000 years, the lunar month, now this may provoke you if you're not familiar with it, shifts with respect to season by 1 month every 2000 years. So the Margashirsha has shifted by about 4 months. So 4 times 2 is 8,000 years. Just a back of envelope calculation tells you Mahabharata war happened 8,000 years ago. This is independent evidence from Arundhati Vasishtha. I'm going to combine it. When I combine it, what it tells me is that there is even another narrow evidence. If I add additional evidence, it gives me a very beautiful 1600 year interval from 5125 BC to 6722 BC. About 1600 years, something else. If the right evidence is available, then only astronomy as a discipline of science is capable of giving you such precise and accurate answers in history. No other evidence, no other scientific evidence can give you a precise answer. Now, this can be right or wrong, that's a different issue, but precision is only possible, especially for deep antiquity, only through astronomy, assuming right evidence exists. We are lucky the evidence exists for Mahabharata, Ramayana, and so on. So now we have a 1600 year interval. Now somebody will ask the question, how did I figure out the 5561 BC? I'm going to fast forward now. Quickly, how you can figure out the first day of the war. Just something that you can relate to. So I included this slide. Number of you are familiar with the phases of the moon from Amavasya to Purnima, right? Different tithis. Many people do Upwas, Ekadashi, and so on. Mahabharata gives the descriptions of the phases and positions of the moon through the 18 days of the war. Not for every day, but what it does, for the first 7 days of the war, Mahabharata doesn't talk of the moon evidence. It doesn't describe moon at all, first 7 days. Then beginning with the 8 days, all the way to the end of the war, and until one day after, Mahabharata talks about the moon. Like moon is doing this, blah, blah, blah. Moon looks like this, Duryodhana going around, so on and so forth. Something more interesting. Beginning with the 12th day, through the 18th last day of the war and 18th plus, Mahabharata talks about moon so much, and all places it is describing the bright moon, the full moon, the Purnimaka moon, Purnimaka Chand kind of thing, it's just describing it everywhere. In addition, it also talks on specific days, the position of the moon. Like 12th day, it says it's near Kritika. On the 17th day, it says like up near Punarvasu. And much of a Mahabharata evidence talks about Pushya, okay, as the last day of the war. And that is when the Kali Yuga begins, okay? So if you have another date, 3102 BC, get rid of that. That's not when Kali Yuga began. That's a totally another subject. You can watch my talks. Kali Yuga began on the last day of Mahabharata war. That is what Mahabharata text says 100 times, Purana says, and so on and so forth. Many of our acharyas say that too. Okay, now quickly 5561 BCE. This is the evidence that took me 5 days with 40 students, 8 hours a day, and still we were not done. So I'm going to give you a flavor, and hopefully you will watch those talks. Those talks are also at least partial talks, 7 of them, 11 hours of recording, and there was more, but it was not put there. Is there at the Chinmaya site. Okay, those who are deeply into astronomy, they may go there. But astronomy evidence in the sense of now only the planetary evidence. Everything I discussed was also astronomy, but now the planets that you know is 50 plus reach. And in the Indian astronomy, but even the Western astronomy, remember the sun and moon are also planets, graha. Okay. So how do you find this out? Just going to give you some flavor. There are 50 plus evidence, but you actually don't need 50 plus to arrive at 5561 BC. I'm just going to give you a couple of demonstrations. I'm not seeing you, so I won't ask you the question, how many of you are good in astronomy and so on. But number of you, I will assume there are some. And if I say the word vakra, immediately they are going to jump and say, oh, I know what that is. That's retrograde. Well, that's true, but not if you go back to Mahabharata. That time vakra meant slightly different than retrograde. If again, you don't know technically, just carry on with me. One of the evidence of Mahabharata says, Sena Yora Shivam Ghoram Karishyati Mahagraha Maga Swangarako Vakra Shravanecha Brahaspati. So Angarak, Mars, went Vakra near Nakshatra Maga, and Brahaspati, Jupiter, Guru, that planet went Vakra near Nakshatra Shravana. That same reference comes again. So that's, I'm putting the Mars near Maga. Earth is at the center, Nakshatra, as we see in the sky. Many people don't even know how to know the Nakshatra, identify the Nakshatra. Okay, so you have to take it on a Shraddha, but if you feel deeply interested, then you have to study those. So those are our reference point, miles point, that tells us where the planet is, where the moon is. So that's where that is happening. And for Jupiter, it is happening near Nakshatra Shravana. There are additional references of Vakra motion. Krutva Changarako Vakra Jishtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthete Maitram Samshayamanniva. That same Mars again went Vakra near Anuradha and Jeshta Nakshatra. So we will point those out, Anuradha and Jeshta Nakshatra. Now there is a Vakra motion described in Harivamsha, the appendix of Mahabharata, that also very nicely matches. I'm not going to go there. Just keep this in mind. Now, those of you who understand astronomy, they will say, but Vakra is a retrograde. And Nilesh, you are saying in Mahabharata, Vakra is not retrograde, but retrograde motion is very important. And how come Vyasa will not describe that if he's giving 50 observation? Well, Vyasa actually describes retrograde. How does he describe retrograde? Let's look at this. He describes the retrograde motion. What happens is, as seen from the Earth, the planet as if comes there, becomes steady and goes backwards, makes some kind of a shape in the sky in that area, stays there, and then goes further. It is apparent motion. We'll not go into technicalities. At the time of Mahabharata war, Mars is doing that near Chitra and Swati. Dhruvam prajulitam ghoram apasavya pravartate Chitra Swatyantere chaiva dishtita parushagra. Those of you who understand retrograde, when the planet goes retrograde, especially superior planets, visible to the naked eye, which means Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. When they go retrograde, they become steady near some nakshatra, go backwards, and then go forward, but they also get brighter. Again, I'll not go into technical details. Among those three, Mars gets extremely brighter. And guess what? That is captured by Vyasadeva. Dhruvam prajwalitam ghoram. He's giving double adjective there. It has become bright, but extremely bright or scary bright, ghoram. And it is now going in the backward direction. Apasavya pravartate, non-normal motion. That is what retrograde happens. Where? Chitra Swatyantere chaiva dishtita parushagra, between nakshatra Chitra and Swati. Okay. Now, if you, then it goes further to Shravan. Now, if you look at the retrograde motion of Jupiter and Saturn, it says Samvastara Sthainancho Graho Prajulito Ubho Vishakhayo Samipasto. They are doing it in the vicinity of a nakshatra Vishakha, so that we can show it here and so on. And one more, I will take it. Venus. Its retrograde motion is also given. Shukram proshtapade purve samarya vishampate uttaretu parikramya sahita pratyudikshite. Vyasadeva is saying Shukra at that time of Mahabharata war came to near nakshatra proshtapade purve, purva bhadrapada. Then it made a parikrama by turning northward. It made a parikrama, uttaretu parikramya. The way we do parikrama pradakshina in the mandir. Uttaretu parikramya sahita pratyudikshite. And where? Near purva bhadrapada. out of 50, this is like possibly what, 4, 5, and then previous page 3. So total of like say 7. If you just take this 7 and you try to match this year starting from us, of course, we have a 1600-year period. So you should start there if you understand scientific logic. But even if someone says, no, let me, for the heck of it, let me start from today. Even if you start from today and go for last 10,000 years, the evidence that I just shared with you, it will only take you to 5561 BC, no other year. I'm going to go very fast. I'm at a 44 minutes and I want to stop at about 50 and leave you some time for question answer. If you take evidence like this, what I just showed you, Vakra, and I'm going to start superimposing, then you put retrograde evidence that I just shared with you. Then you put 7 graphs affecting sun, moon 3 times. Then you put akramya happening to 2 planets. Then you put pidyate, sun, moon doing it to Rohini, Saturn doing to Rohini, Jupiter doing to Rohini. Then you look at various conjunctions described in Mahabharata text. Then you look at eclipses. Then you look at the Tiriac motion of Mercury. And then you look at phases and positions of the moon. 50 plus evidence. It is going to take you to 5561 BC. But you don't need all of this. But once you define your theory, you must take all the evidence of that kind into account. And you must show how that evidence matches for your date. Last day of the war, this evidence I'm showing you for a different reason. I had not found it until 2 years ago. I don't know how many of you have heard the name Sai Swarupa Iyer. She has written a novel on Draupadi and Rukmini and so on, writes very beautifully. She was studying details, making a detailed study of 18 days of the war like a couple of years ago. And I said, hey, I made a request if she can let me know of any astronomy evidence she comes across. And she kindly agreed. And this evidence she's given me, I had missed it after my 30 plus readings of Mahabharata. That's how fascinating Mahabharata is. You miss a lot. Last day of the war, here description is given that Shalya and Yudhishthir are fighting, and Yudhishthir kills Shalya, as you know. And that is compared. See, this is how the evidence comes. It is compared with a fight between Moon and a Saturn. And when she gave that evidence to me, I said, Moon and a Saturn, that's not a usual comparison. You usually find comparison between Venus and Jupiter, or Mars and Mercury, Venus and Mercury, and so on, but not like a moon and a planet, something like this. And then I have these positions in my brain, but I said more than likely it may not match for 5561 BC. But then I got to my simulator and astronomy calculations. Guess what? The 18th night, the 2nd November 5561 BCE, about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and 18 or 17 doesn't matter. You can go plus minus 1 day and the same thing. The moon rises, and through the whole night until the sunrise, the only 2 planets in the night sky, because that's when these observations are made of a planets and thing. Only 2 planets in the entire sky, nobody else, is Saturn and Moon. Vyasa is that fascinating in noting down what is happening at the time of the Mahabharata war. I'm going to quickly speed forward you to two types of evidence. Oceanography. Now, this is how I established 5561 BC. If you take Mahabharata descriptions of flooding and destruction of Krishna's Dwarka, when the sea water gushed into the Dwarka, 36 years after the Mahabharata war, it gives us a year 5525 BCE. So now our claim is that 5525 BC is the flooding and destruction of Dwarka year. But now we can ask the question, is there evidence for it? Well, yeah, Mahabharata astronomy is there, but flooding and destruction right on the ground. And if we start looking for it, actually there is around the world. Okay, I'm giving you only the prominent evidence. So yes, there is evidence on the Dwarka coast. There is evidence on the eastern India coast, Tamil Nadu. There is evidence for this sudden flooding happening in 5525 BC in Indonesia, in Australia. At the Black Sea formation happened in 5525 BC. You see, actually, I'll put all the names there. You see the evidence in the Dogger Bank between Scotland and Norway. You see the evidence on the east coast of USA, Maine. You see the evidence in 7 different places in the Caribbean. Very fascinating evidence. For example, 15-meter rise, that's a guy's 50 feet sudden rise, okay, in 5525 BC on the west coast of India, Gujarat. Sudden ingressations of water 10-20 kilometers inside and staying there for next 2000 years on the Mayuram in Tamil Nadu. Achebanda, just a fascinating evidence. Actually, I will show that to you. Same thing in Australia, same thing Pumpuhar. Black Sea was not there. It was only a sweetwater lake until 5525 BCE. This is a work of Columbia geologists Ryan and Pittman. Maine, you can find Caribbean. This is my alumnus from University of Alberta in Canada. He was doing in geology PhD, Paul Blanchon. That is the work published in 1995, but I became aware only after 2010. In Caribbean, 7 different places, sudden sea level rise of 6.5 plus meters, which is what, almost 20 feet in 5525 BC. Just tremendous evidence. I'll show you one from Aceh Banda. In that cave, they have found a beautiful evidence. The evidence I'm showing is for a reason. So this is the Dwarka flooding, 5525 BC. But many of you, including good number of Indians, we are stuck because of we don't do tapasya and try to read Mahabharata, study Mahabharata. Many of us, if somebody asks, when did Mahabharata war happen? You're going to get a lazy answer, just like the civilization answer, 5,000 years old, 5,000 years ago. Many people say that. In fact, there is a zero evidence for any flooding, okay, between 3,500 BC to 1500 BC. So I'm saying not only there is no evidence, there is a negative evidence for anyone claiming flooding and destruction of Dwarka, Krishna's Dwarka we are talking, happening between 3,500 BC and 1500 BC. This evidence is like not more than 4 years old, okay? This is from a research paper. I'll just skip fast because I'm on the 50th minute. Yeah, bathymetric studies, everything shows the same way. Quick genetics one I want to share. It's very fascinating. Now, if you take 18 Okshohini, and if you read Mahabharata, it will lead you to approximately 4 million men dying in the Mahabharata war. Now, to put that in the context, we need to know the population of the world. The estimates you find is from 5 to 20 millions, okay, in the 6th millennium BCE. So we'll take higher number to make sense of it, and I'll show you. This is now, so I'm fast forwarding from 5561 BCE to 2015 CE, like less than 7 years ago. Monica Carmin published a paper with 30 other authors in genetics. They have nothing to do with the Mahabharata, frankly, nothing specific about India. They looked at all the genetics data around the world and were trying to understand what we can study from it. And I'm going to show you in a minute what they found out. They found out many things. I'm going to show you the relevant one. Just notice that India is shown with a forest green color. The west of India, this is Afghanistan, sorry, this is Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, all the way to Israel. This is in that saffron color. Africa is red. Europe is yellow. This whatever that pink color is Siberia, northern Russian part, and we can ignore these colors. This is in the context of the Mahabharata war. So who played in the Mahabharata war? People, everyone from India. And I don't know if you know this, but actually majority of the people who supported Kaurava side, they came from India, but they also came from the west of India. Okay. That's all part of an Indian civilization in that time. Also, people came from east side and they also fought on both sides. Most of the south side, again, there is a mixture at the interface, supported Pandavas, and then the mix in the middle, they supported either Pandavas or Kauravas, and as you go to the west, they supported Kauravas. Okay, if I have a map, I will quickly show you. This is the Pandava side. So UP, Rajasthan, southwest like a Gujarat, then Chedi is like Madhya Pradesh and UP border, you can say Magadha, Bihar. Okay, and the southern, they supported Pandava. If you go here, many people may not know that. Again, you might have a misunderstanding that you have imbibed Bhagadatta from Pragjotishpur and therefore Assam. No, Mahabharata has no evidence for that. In fact, Bhagadatta is from Iraq, as far as Iraq. That description you find in Mahabharata, you also find in the Ramayana, Pragjotishpur to the west of India, and how far and where it is. Shalya coming from northwest India, not today's northwest India, the India of that type. So we are talking of Afghanistan and Pakistan and Iraq and Caspian Sea area. Neela coming from MP, Krutavarma from southwest, like Krishna's, this is a Krishna's clan actually. Jayadratha from the now the Sindh province of Pakistan. Sudakshana is coming from Iran and further there. This is coming from MP, Odisha, northwest. Trigartha is also now modern day Pakistan, like Multan area, you can say. That's why I'm saying the westward. Why I'm saying this to you? Now we ask the question, if the 4 million exclusive men fell down, are we lucky? Is there some evidence left of it, either in archaeology or in genetics? We haven't found much in archaeology. Well, in an Indian tradition, the bodies are burnt and all that. This is a quick method. Estimated world population 20 million. I'm taking the highest number. If you just consider for the area that I showed you for the folks who fought in Mahabharata war, say half of it, 10 millions. So out of that 10 millions, 5 millions would be men, 5 millions would be women, right? Now, out of that 5 million, 4 million, that is a 18 Aukshohini, Mahabharata calculation, the male, exclusive male died. So population estimate for female to male ratio came down to 5:1. But when we are looking at Carmen's paper, we are looking at the genetic diversity ratio. And that ratio is 16:1. But I'm going to also show you the connection with a 5:1 or 4:1 in a second. From that paper, I'm pulling something. If there is an earthquake, that you heard a news of earthquake, immediately what do you ask? Oh my God, earthquake. Oh, where did it happen? Oh, how serious was it? What was the Richter scale? And when did it happen? Those are the three questions typically you ask. Think of this Mahabharata war as a genetic earthquake, okay, just as a metaphor, and try to ask the same three questions. So how serious was this deal? The genetic papers is telling you. Now, genetic papers is not talking of Mahabharata. Just think sometime they say in the world, there was a choking of a male lineage. The female diversity in the gene to male diversity, that ratio became 16. Now, therefore, we might say 16:1. But think of it. If you exclude this peak, then the average is around that 4 before that, if you think it's a 4. So if you do 16:4, actually it is 4:1, just like that 5:1 ratio that I showed you. Now, the next question you would ask is, when did it happen? Because that can happen for many reasons. Well, the paper tells you it happened in the 6th millennium BC, or very precisely around 7,500 years ago. And the next question you will ask, where is the epicenter? Where was the biggest impact for this male-female diversity imbalance? The answer is what they call South Asia is actually India. Remember the forest green color. The first line from this control group, this is modeling, guys, okay? So don't go by the continuous line. The first one to go down, feel the significant impact is India. The second one is Near East. All the Kuru armies, the coming from all the way Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, modern day Pakistan, all the way to Syria and Turkey and whatnot. Okay, that's this orange or whatever that saffron color is. And we don't have to go further, but if you look at the further line, Southeast Asia, which is Myanmar, Laos, Indonesia, and so on. See, those are the first one affected. The biggest one that is affected is India. When did it happen? 7,500 years ago. And what happened? The female variation was broad. It didn't become bigger. It stayed where it is, but the male variation went down significantly, 4 times. Okay, and that's what it is. This is a genetic evidence. And after that, there is a outward migrations from India, like cows, Indian zebu cows went all the way to Europe, and the timing of that can be found. This is another genetics paper. From 5500 BC to 1600 BC, we are seeing the migration of cows, and cows just don't go grazing on their own. They are going with the human beings. But again, just to give you one more, the domesticated mouse, which is directly connected with agriculture. Again, so wild mouse to domestic mouse, that transition happened in India. Look at this. This is a Bonhamy paper from 2007. And from the domestic mouse, different varieties, all of them originated in India, but they went out with the migrations, with the agriculture, with the commerce, and so on. Okay, quick, these are my books. If you are in America, through Amazon. If you are in India, through Subu Publications. Don't expect the Indian book price to here. That's not how it works. The shipping cost is the nightmare. Quick summary, Mahabharata war happened in 5561 BC, more than 7,500 years ago. Enormous scientific evidence from astronomy, oceanography, genetics, hydrology, geology, genealogy, and 20 plus other sciences exist which support this date. Remember, science is about more likely versus less likely. Everything, including the best and sophisticated you see. In that comparison, this evidence is actually impressive, more impressive than some of the evidence you see for hard sciences, meaning something that even we can test it today. With history, we don't have that luxury. We are stuck with whatever is described in Mahabharata. There is no point asking something that is not described in Mahabharata text. We need Shraddha, but we also need Samshaya, we need Jidnyasa, we need Vijnana Buddhi, we need Tarka Shastra. Mahabharata is our Itihas, inspiring, objective. Please consider reading it. We must own it. All right, I went 8 minutes over my time, but with that, if we have any time left, we can take few questions and I'll try to respond to them. Thank you. So I will give the control back to Raviji, and If there are any questions, we'll read them. And also if somebody wants to ask, we will do that too.
Yeah, I see some comments in the chat. There's one question in that. It says, is it true that 18th February is the date of Lord Krishna's disappearance?
Good question. First thing, I don't know the answer to that. We know the evidence is such that we only know the year. And again, when I say 1 year, 55-25, it can be 55-25 plus minus 1. You know, when somebody says I'm a 50-year-old, the person may mean he's 49, he's 50, he's 51, something like this. But we don't, I mean, there is no evidence, at least that I am aware of, that can allow us to determine the date of Krishna's disappearance. I can tell you Krishna's appearance, that is 27-28, because remember, he born at a midnight. 27-28 June, 5633 BCE. 5633 BCE. And you can watch my talk, Biography of Krishna, on Sangam Talks.
Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question now?
Can you repeat the book? Can you repeat the name of the books and where you can find it?
Right. I mean, I will repeat the names of the books also. When did the Mahabharata war happen? Bhishma Nirvana and the Historic Rama. These are my 3 books which are out there right now. And if you remember my name, Nilesh Oak, if you just, I mean, those of you who are in America, if you go to Amazon, type Nilesh Oak, Nileshoak, those all 3 books will right away pop up.
Okay. Thanks a lot. It was an excellent talk.
Thank you.
Learned a lot.
Okay,
Hi,
there are
Nilesh,
more hands up, by the way.
Hi, Nilesh. This is
Namaskar.
Jayant Angar. I have seen many of your videos along with those of Raj Vedam and the one Talagiri,
Yeah.
as well as Mr. The French person.
Michel Danino or
Michel
Gautier?
Danino.
Michel Danino, yeah.
Many, we have 20 plus videos.
Yes.
And I know there is one topic that bugs me, because not just me, but most of us growing up at the time period that we did,
Yeah.
we were fed about the wrong theories of Aryan invasion and so on and so forth.
Correct.
Is there any effort being made to correct our textbooks for the coming generation?
Okay. Great question. Very good question. Very important question. And my 2 cents are these. Many efforts are going on. So Raj Vedam ji is trying in his own way. I am trying in my own way. So when I say my own way, it's not like we are not working together or anything, but in our own ways. What happens is, if you look at these guys, either say someone like Raj Vedam ji or Michel Danino, they are not necessarily always done original research, but they're extracting wisdom, extracting some gold nuggets from the research done by others. Even my astronomy research is original, but the genetics research is I'm taking somebody's research and connecting it, right? So that is actually extraction. We get so busy that your question is relevant, but everyone who is listening here, if they truly care, they have to become active. There is also, I mean, I work with the government of culture, I work with the government of ministry, but somebody, I mean, what really irritates me, because that means the person doesn't understand reality. Somebody telling me, oh, so why don't you talk to Ministry of Education and get it done? If it was that simple, it would have been done long time ago. So what we really need is, it just like say attending one lecture, attending this, talking in just one con is not enough. It has to become our main course, just like we talk cricket or we talk a Bollywood movie. It has to become, one minute, it has to become that mainstream. And if there is that atmosphere among the people, then the government would listen. Government also needs this thing. Government, I mean, they have their own compulsions, but government also, there is no point telling government, you do it. Because if you work with government, you realize there are no experts there. And, you know, many babus are also there. So we also actually, somebody needs to do it. And likes of me and Raj Vedam and many others are doing it in our own small ways. But I mean, we do work whole during the day. I don't know if you look, you know, I look like I haven't got sleep. I was working. I mean, this is not boasting or something. I was actually working until 3 o'clock in the morning. Then I slept until 7 o'clock. Then I got on a 9 o'clock call. And none of this I get paid for, by the way, So, I mean, there is no point asking, I mean, you are not asking that, but there is no point asking the people that you see, the names that you mentioned, to do more. They are to their limits. At least I can tell you for my way. So everyone has to participate. This is not a spectator sport, and things will happen. So that's just my 2 cents, Jaiji.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I say something?
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you very much, Mr. Oak. I also want to tell you, I heard your Sangam talks, I've read your blogs, and I give a reference to the dates of Mahabharata and Ramayana when I speak on those subjects. I speak for a group called WARP, which is part of a larger group, international group called HWPL, which someone from Korea started. We discuss various religions and commonality between them. And in pretty much every talk, when I mention Ramayana and Mahabharata, I give your dates and I give you. That's what I wanted to tell.
Thank you. And thank you. And I mean, I'm not thanking you because you give my dates. That is not the reason I'm thanking you. I tell people, I said, they can take my presentations on the front slide where it says Nilesh Oak, they can put their name.
No,
this is not about plagiarism we're talking. And they start talking about it. What is important is that whatever is the truth or the best approximation to the truth is conveyed to people. Yes, you can give a credit. Oh, Nilesh Oak did this. Now see, 5561 was also determined, some of you may know, by Dr. P.V. Vartak as early as 1980s. Okay, now if it's a longer, if it's a longer talk, I talk about it. If it's a shorter talk, I don't talk, because then you don't talk essential stuff. Now, some people, like you can see them, is saying, oh, he did not mention Dr. Vartak. I said, if every time we start with the Adam and Eve, we cannot go any further than they achieved, in their lifetime. Okay. Thank you. But thank you for doing that.
I have some observation I want to share with you.
Please.
Mr. Oak. I'm glad Jayant brought up several of the points. We had been talking about it just yesterday also, and even before. There's one observation which I want to know if that can shed additional light. And this is related to the genetic aspects. Okay. A lot of people have been saying, particularly the Aryan invasion theory people, saying that they came from the steppe area of Ukraine and they brought horses and everything in India, and they want to date Mahabharata after 1500 BC as a result of that kind of theory that they've been pushing. Just to say, given that is the case, then those very people are reluctant to accept that the descendants of those people, when they're out migrating, like the gypsies, as we call Romania people, they don't seem to see that people are going round and round.
Correct. Yeah.
And you pointed out a very good point, which was the out migration that took place soon after the Mahabharata war.
Yeah.
The cows and the mice and everything were taken there. So one has to really make a connection between all those cycles, and they have not done that.
Correct. Good observation. I'll make two comment statements on that. The first statement is, everyone can relate to this, everyone knows it. If somebody is truly sleeping, it's easy to wake up that person. If somebody is pretending to be asleep, then it is impossible to wake up that person. And the second point, see, these kind of things, when they will do this, but they will show total ignorance to understand something simple. It used to frustrate me for a long time. And if you are watching these videos, then you would see that frustration sometime. I do that with a smile on my face. But that helped me. Bhagavad Gita has helped me. Krishna says, if somebody has a tamasic buddhi, what does that person do? Adharmyam dharmyam itiya manyate tamasavruta sarvarthan viparitamsha buddhisa partha tamasi. That person takes the truth and basically with his tamasi buddhi or her tamasi buddhi understands it exactly opposite, 180-degree opposite. Now, that doesn't solve the problem because still they don't understand, but at least it gave me peace. Like I am doing and why this guy is not understanding. By the way, it's not limited to the Western folks. Many in India, even in our pro-India groups, go in such a circles. And, if you tell them that you don't have a scientific acumen, you don't have a logical reasoning, they get angry. It's like somebody saying, hey, you know what, there is some black dot on your face. You don't get angry. You thank that person, you go to the mirror and clean it up. But this is tough, when you tell them. So thank you very much. Good observation. Yeah, we have to educate everyone.
I wanted to ask you that, we are talking about the India, and India was not the only India. I think India was part, the whole Middle Eastern country. What do you think about that? And number two, if Bhagwan was there, then Lord Krishna, or I know they can change the mind of the people that they do not behave improperly. But why need to be what is the theory behind killing, having the Mahabharata and the killing that many people?
Okay, good. Both good questions. The first one you said, what are my thoughts about the western part of west of India being part of India? I hope you paid attention to what I was saying. So I don't need to answer that. That's exactly what I was saying. So if you want to, unless you want me to repeat the presentation, that's what I was saying. It's a civilizational India that we are talking, not so much the boundaries, because there were many Janapadas. Yeah, very much so. Civilizationally, it was connected. It was not through invasions of the kind that we have seen through the Abrahamic faiths. That was not that kind of invasion. Yes, there were wars. There were fighting and wars. And, it's not to say the Indian society was perfect. In any given society, there is a Prakriti. From there, we put efforts to create Sanskruti, like a clean roads and stuff like that. But people can make it dirty, but even make it dirtier and may break the road. That is Vikruti. So that happens everywhere. That is there. But civilization, it was there. The second question you had is if Krishna is there and a Bhagwan, and then so why they had to be killed or something. First thing, Sama Dama Dandaved. Okay, everyone needs a different tool. Even in Bhagavad Purana, Krishna says, even the Madhyam Bhakta, what does it say? Ishware tad adhineshu balisheshu dvishatsucha, because the type of people that you deal with are not of the same kind. Ishware tad adhineshu balisheshu dvishatsucha. There are 4 kinds of people. Prema maitri krupo peksha. With some you do prema, with other you do friendship. With somebody, my prema maitri krupo, compassion, show compassion, and to some you show indifference. Similarly, Chanakya talks of Sama Dhamma Dandabhed. So you have to do that. Another thing is very important. We understand the avatar. Because just like say Jaiji asked, now I'm just taking Jaiji's name. He didn't maintain that way. Like, okay, what are we doing about the textbook? Why we can't do it? Many times we ask the same way, like why the Bhagwan is so much going on? Why the Bhagwan doesn't take avatar? Okay, we forget. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkrutam. Bhagwan comes for those both. Not only to vinashaya cha dushkrutam. So if there are no sadhus to be saved, Bhagwan may not come.
That's a good.
Okay, so that is the important point. Also, Krishna did not fight it alone. In fact, Krishna did not fight the Mahabharata war. Rama fought with the Vanaras. Vanaras are human beings only. Human beings from Karnataka. Okay, so yeah, that's what it is. So we have to be there, and through that Shakti, in the Puranas, when we hear the story, like Rakshasas were doing something and Prithvi become tired and went to Brahma. Who is that Prithvi? We are the eyes and ears of Prithvi. Those are the descriptions you will find in our text. Okay, so we have to do it. Just like Jaiji asked, like changing the textbooks. If you are expecting somebody else, will not happen. We all have to work together. There is a story in Upanishad, 10 guys traveling through the forest. I will not go into that just to avoid digression and leave you some time for questions, assuming we have some. Any other questions, comments? Yeah. Raviji?
There's a comment in the chat from, I think it's from Rajesh Sheth. How did you get this much passion on this subject?
Even so, this talk was really wonderful. Oh, is maybe down there. Oh, how did you get this much passion on this subject? That's hard to explain. Okay, like you would, you know the story of Bhimsen Joshi, right? I mean, say Lata Mangeshkar case. Of course, she was just a magic, but circumstances forced her. Her father Dinanaji passed away, and then she has to almost do it for the family. But Bhimsen Joshi, ran from the house, because he will not get this, worked at other people's houses. How do you get the passion? It's very difficult to answer that question. It's very difficult to answer, like what it happens. I'll give you just a sidebar. I don't know if that answers the question, but in 2009, when I solved this 15-year-long mystery to me of Arundhati Vasishta, like showing mathematically, astronomically that Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta, as Vyasa is saying in the Mahabharata. When I made that discovery, it was a Friday, 8 May. I remember the day, Friday evening, and just like today, I worked until 3 o'clock. I kept on working Arundhati Vasishta until 5 o'clock in the morning. Now that day, 5 o'clock, because I solved the mystery. By midnight, I solved it, and now I was validating the calculations. The point I'm telling is, I was sitting alone, nobody else is there. And first, I did not believe the calculations that this is actually happening, although that's what I want it to happen for 15 years. So I'm saying, am I making any mistake? And after that, now many people ask me that question, just like this question, where you get this passion? They said, so what was your reaction? And what was, oh, you must be so overjoyous. Actually, I wasn't overjoyous. See, that's why in our text, we always talk about Om Shanti, 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 or the Prasannatma, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma. The Prasannatma is not the guy who is going into a laughter. The Prasannatma is a totally content and a peaceful person. That time, if there was any feeling, it was the feeling of a contentment. But I said, we all are going to go, leave this body at some point. And of course, I want to live longer and do all the fun things. But if the Paramatma decides that, Nilesh, today is your time, I would consider the 8 May 2009 as the most happy time to move on to the next journey. It was the time of peace and content and the experience that I'm trying to just give the names to it, but it's difficult to describe. My point is to answer that question. The passion is very difficult to say where it comes from. And maybe past life, God knows, but just past life is not enough. Patanjali Yoga Sutra talks about it. And it's just not the passion. You have to have that intellect, or you have to acquire the intellect. And Patanjali says there are some people who are lucky who get it from their past lives. But that is not the end of it. The next sutra says, Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, Purvaka, Itaresham. For the others, they can achieve the same thing through Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna. So it was a journey, whatever the past life might have come, but the journey was also there through Shraddha, Virya, Smriti. What is the Shraddha? The Shraddha was, why would Vyasa write something that is impossible in the very order of nature? What is his purpose? He could have gotten away with some omens by saying the cat walked in front of you. Many people of us think, if the cat goes in front of you, it's a bad omen. Why he has to say that Arundhati there is walking ahead of Vasishta? So I trusted, I had a Shraddha in the words of Vyasa, and I could have been wrong, because there is no difference between Shraddha and Andhashraddha. Anyways, that's a long answer. I don't know even if I answered the question, but it's hard to answer.
And this is Vinod Soni.
Nilesh, there is one very simple question asked about the...
Hold on. Somebody else was saying something, right? Somebody else was saying something before
this
you.
This is Dr. Soni. I appreciate your talk. I just finished reading the book Homo Sapiens. And I was always wondering why somebody's not writing anything about our culture.
Good question. Good question.
Listening to you, I think I'm so proud of you, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I have always wondered about the timeline.
Yeah, I am by the way, because you said it, I am writing book on that. I'm not giving the same titles. Yeah. In fact, let me share you something, because everyone knows what he's referring to. Harari's book, Sapiens. Yes. Okay.
Homo Sapiens, yes.
Yeah, Sapiens. Okay, just give me a second. You will have maybe you'll have goosebumps. Let's see.
He never mentions about Vedic period or anything about Hindus.
Yeah, because I will tell you, and if I had a time, I would have written about it. Overall, the book is good. The flow is good. Some of the things are correct. Many of the things, and especially when it comes to Indian civilization, it's not just Harari. Everyone outside India, with a few exceptions, and majority also in India, do a disaster par excellence. Disaster. This is, see, so for example, Mahabharata here, 5561, Ramayana is here. This is not just my work, by the way. This is a work of some other names that you may be familiar, Rupa Bhatti and so on. So actually, we have predictions made all the way to going back to 220,000 years. But for this year, this will become a centerpiece for the India book 2022 that is being printed. Again, other than this, I'm not involved. This will be the center spread. But going back to 72,000, Toba explosion from 72, so this is a 70,000 years of history. So he's talking 10,000, 20,000, it can be written. See, the challenge is, by the way, just so that you know, my 3 books, and if you're interested, you may buy them, whatever it is. I have not, I mean, the distributor in India, I don't take any money. I want that to be sustainable. Here I get some royalty or something, but that has cost me more than this. So it's not some enterprise. Some people think, oh, so you do all your stuff, sustenance on the books. I said, no, that books buy me pav bhaji or vada pav once in a while. So the idea is to do that. And if you find some free source to download, absolutely fine. This is not about you buying or something. And there are sources, I'll not necessarily tell you because there are many, but you can actually, I mean, the California library system, if you know, you can download my books, you know, so it's not about purchasing or anything. Yeah.
Not about money, yes.
I had a question. It was a wonderful, excellent talk and presentation. I wish we can have a little more time. And you picked 3 different, and my question is, you picked out 3 different events from your chart to go into detail. The one thing is you talk about the high water happening throughout the world in places. And you didn't have enough time to go in detail, but was that anything to do with some kind of geological event or astronomical event that happened, the high water all over the world?
Great question. There are many theories. We have a very solid evidence. See, this is called Karya Karana Bhav, one of the 11 elements of a scientific acumen, Vijnana Buddhi. It will become a subject by itself, as you can relate to. That's why I did not go it. There is a theory of the comet hitting and all that. It could be true, but that's not the whole thing. It's a very fascinating subject. I mean, again, that just geographical thing I have studied for 30 plus years. I have given some talks on it, but it's a subject by itself. We need 10 days to just discuss, Anjanaji, what you asked.
Okay, thank you.
Good. A question.
You are on the mute, by the way. You were raising hand, so.
Yeah, unmute.
This is Rakesh Popley. Given the Mahabharata's magnitude of the event in terms of 4 million people dying in the process, why has there not been more archaeological research, archaeological findings of this event of this magnitude?
Okay, so who asked that? Sorry, I couldn't.
My name is Rakesh Popley.
Rakeshji, okay. Okay, the question, so question first is, I mean, good question. Question is says why there is no archaeological evidence for event of such a great magnitude. Now the question has some misunderstanding. The question has a misunderstanding that as if like we demand certain kind of evidence and it shows up. That's not how it works. All the evidence that we have from any discipline of science or even a non-science, it is data analytics folks know that it is a happenstance data. We just happen to get that data. We were lucky to have that data. So Nyaya Darshana is very, very good on that. It's a hard realist science. There is no Darshana more hard realist than Nyaya Darshana. Nyaya Darshana says Pramana Taschartha Pratipadde. You can talk about the only evidence you have. There is no point talking about the evidence you don't have. You are wasting time. 4.2.29, 4.2.30, it says Pramana Anupapatya Upapattibhyam. The evidence that you don't have, it doesn't help you to prove anything. It doesn't help you to disprove anything. Okay. Now, of course, Rajesh, you will say, well, somebody should just like our Jayji asked, like do something on the textbook. I mean, he didn't ask me, but why is not somebody digging? Again, you did not ask that. But if you ask that question, that is again has a misunderstanding. Many people don't realize the amount of money that is required to do these things. It's enormous. even for a rich country like America. But think of India, we have other challenges. We shouldn't be spending time. My point is there is so much evidence. Even if we spend time to understand it properly, that is also not happening. That is also not happening. Enormous evidence. And if anybody is thinking just by finding more archaeology evidence, we will feel more confident, then that is also a misunderstanding. Okay, because no matter how much evidence you find in any discipline of science, it is going to look minuscule. I'll quote Sir Karl Popper. He says, while we all of us, you might think I know more about Mahabharata. The person who has read more knows how little he knows about Mahabharata. Like I had to wait until 2 years for a Saisorupa year to give me the reference of astronomy. Now I'm claiming I'm read it 30 times. I didn't get that. Sir Karl Popper has a quote, while we differ, all of us differ in little bits of what we know. When it comes to ultimate ignorance, we are all equal. And that applies to that evidence thing. So we should not, your question is correct. But if there is a loaded thing behind, so therefore we should do more or something, then that's not correct. I'm not stopping anyone from taking an axe and start digging it. But that person, one who wants to see more archaeology evidence, I don't mean Rajeshji you, but you are asking the question, so I'm saying you included, has to start digging. There is no point asking others, because then you don't understand how the evidence is collected. So for example, like when I do Mahabharata Ramayana, now the people will say, why don't you do on a Bhagavad Purana? And I have to tell the person, that is because I have done on Bhagavad Purana, you don't bother to read what I have done. Okay, but sorry, Rajeshji, by the way, I'm just taking that opportunity to say what I wanted to say. It wasn't directed at you or anything. It's a frequently asked question, by the way. Raviji, you are mute. Do I need to unmute you or something, or no, you can? Okay.
No, I can do it. So is there any other question that somebody wants to ask Nileshji?
Yeah, I did put my question in, just a clarification. Many of the slides you showed, I believe that you may have, in your talks you have said elsewhere, you use the NASA software for this purpose. I would just like to say a few words on that so that people understand the complexity that led you to use that software.
Yeah. So when I say NASA, that is for people to easily understand. Like people understand and believe also, like, oh, NASA, oh, okay, good. They don't know anything about NASA either, Okay. I don't know how many of you are in Houston. I've been to Houston, I've been to Florida. I sold aircraft engines, so there was some technology connections, whatnot. So the data is collected by the Hubble telescopes, and so that's why NASA. It's collected by JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab. Although it's a Jet Propulsion Lab, but they collect the data. It's a central database, and then that database is used by many commercial or not so commercial companies to build astronomy softwares. So for example, Carina Soft is one, but there are maybe 30. Carina is the best. I'm dealing with them for many years. If you use astronomy software, some of the things that you see in some of the softwares, some of the features are suggested by me, and I have worked, I'm not an IT guy, but I have worked with them to get those features built into it and that kind of thing. It takes enormous time, guys, by the way. You have to convince them. It's not just technical aspect. You have to convince them to do it. One person, I will not tell the story, lost the job. Partly I'm responsible for it, and how bad I must have felt, because I was asking and he just got excited. He wanted to include it. But again, remember, there are these conflicting interests, like, Hindu, anti-Hindu, whatever it is. And that person lost the job in California, So, these are some things. So answer your question. NASA software is because it's easy. You can use the, I don't know, in Marathi we call Pata or Vanta, I don't know, the Pisneka, whatever you see, the stone tools that you use. Or you can use a mixer. Mixer does is fast, right? Something like this. So astronomy software makes you do it fast. Still, it's a nightmare. It's not something somebody just brings it, and it's not like a smartphone, you plug it and you start playing. But it's makes it so easy. In fact, when you do that, you start appreciating the likes of Dr. P.V. Vartak, Lokmanya Tilak, Pava Kane, S.B. Dikshit, world's greatest astronomer in my mind, Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit. What an amazing work they did. I mean, if we do some another time, Raviji, we will talk about it, like Rohini Shakata Bheda and something like this. Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit had done it in 130 years. I'll tell you, Jet Propulsion Lab or some of the modern so-called researchers in academia and some famous institute, like a so-called famous name, TIFR, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research and all, they could not figure it out until like a 10 or 15 years ago. Even when they figured it out, they couldn't figure it out to the extent Indian astronomers have done it of ancient times. But even what Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit was saying 130 years ago. That is something I just wanted to verify, just like Vyasa's statement, and I did that 10 years ago. Rohini Shakata Bheda. So now the propulsion, the NASA data was useful, because that's why now the people have shut their mouth. Until then, they used to fight with me. Now I show the NASA data shows what Indian astronomers were saying 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And they were predicting something happening 8,000 years ago. How's that? So either they had seen it or they had a sophisticated astronomy to predict it, whichever way it is.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right, if no other questions, I mean, we can wind it up, but I mean, I have a time, it's up to you guys.
No, I think it was a wonderful talk, and I believe everybody enjoyed it. Maybe sometime later we can talk, we can invite you again for another talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and please read the books, read the blogs, definitely watch the videos. And if you have heard me saying this on other videos, I'll say the same thing. If anyone has a sleeping issues, my books works like magic. At the bedtime, you can start taking it, start reading it, and in 15 minutes you'll feel very sleepy and you will have a good night's sleep. Okay, that's on a humorous note. But if you read it, even if you don't understand, don't feel you don't understand Sanskrit and don't feel you understand astronomy. Many of the things in life, we take it on a Shraddha. So the astronomy part, technical, you don't understand. You said, okay, let's assume this is true. He's not lying. But what is the conclusion? Even Shankaracharya, I mean, Danish, Ramdas Swami also says, Samanya lokasi kaya thave, hete anumanachi bolane, most of the thing is like he said, that said, something like that happens. Shankaracharya has said, Satyanrute dve mithuni krutya vartate lokayatra. The people's journey is a mixture of truth and untruth. Some things are true, some things are validated, others are not validated. But still we work with it, right? We have a homeopathy, allopathy, Ayurveda. Somebody says, take that homeopathy tablet. We says, what's the harm? You take it, you feel better. Some people don't feel better. Satyanrute dve mithuni krutya vartate lokayatra. It's perfectly fine to give it a try. See if you understand it. You can move on to the next book, next video, whatever it is. Again, Raviji, thank you very much. Everyone else who helped make this happen. Thank you, everyone. And
Thank you.
enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I will disconnect.